What's up, my friends, and welcome into another edition of the Running Back Podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Tyler Zulli, Frank Klose back with you for another edition of conversation in this week's baseball. And it's been a couple of weeks. We've had some traveling and some vacationing and things like that. So it's been 2 weeks since we had the chance to talk. The last time we chatted was right after the All-Star break. We were trying to decide what this team's future was going to hold. They acquired Luis Arraez, they acquired Brooks Raley, they acquired Caleb Killian, and they were playing, some frustrating baseball at times, to say the least. But Frank, I got to say, the last week or so has certainly been a step in the right direction, not just because of the wins. The offensive productivity feels a lot stronger and a lot more concise, and it's coming from some unexpected sources. And so for me, and hello, by the way, I hope you're doing well. For me, it feels like this has been a much more enjoyable week of baseball than what we've seen over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really is. And really the two names we have to talk about when we're having this conversation is Alec Bohm and Byrson Stott. Now, Stott, I will say, he's been a little bit more consistent than we realize. And I think that when they were both put out of position, now I thought Bohm would have been okay at first base because, they seemed to have no qualms, throw him over there every time they needed a first baseman or whatever Harper's going to DH. But the way that the two of them have taken to the positions, a little rough around the edges at first for Bohm at first. But my gosh, Stott at third base, and he's keeping his bat up. I mean, I think those two are really the story of the last week for the Phillies.
Yeah, Stott to me is such a natural defender. A buddy of mine texted me last night, in fact, and said, "So Stott's just a great third baseman, huh?" And I said, I think Stott's just a great defender. And I think that that's his biggest selling trait. Now, the bat, and we'll talk more about it throughout the show, the bat has been as, impressive as it possibly can be. But I think with him, the calling card is always going to be his defense. I thought he's an elite level second baseman defensively. I thought he was a good shortstop. My only question was going to be moving to third. How did his arm fare? Because when you're playing second, you've got the time to set your feet. You've got the time to make the slide and pop up and throw. It's not that long of a throw. Even if you go all the way up the middle and range to your right, you're still throwing the ball, 90, 100, 105 feet. Those throws from third to first are not easy throws, especially if you've got a range to your right, especially if you're going backwards. That was my big question, was how does Byrson Stott fare as a thrower over at third? Because the glove never worried me. This has been better than I could have expected from Byrson Stott as their third baseman.
I agree. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but Alec Bohm projected to be a free agent. He gives, at the very least, the Phillies some options, Yeah. They're probably going to need to shuffle some things around, but he might end up right back at second base. But I think the Phillies now are thinking like, okay, well, depending on how this all plays out, he could be the third baseman next year. So I think he really is. That's a very, very valuable thing that the Phillies have right now. And by the way, it speaks to them, too, that they had the confidence to try this.
Sure.
Putting three players, let's say out of position because they've all played them at various times. But that, I have to admit, I was like, okay, well, is Alec Bohm going to hit enough to play first base? Is Byrson Stott not being at second base? Is the whole offense as a whole really going to lose something? And I think in both cases, I've been proven kind of wrong with my worry.
Well, and I think you were justified in worrying, having those worries, because heading into that positional switch, heading into the trade deadline, Alec Bohm, for most of the season has fluttered. He had a pocket in May where he was really swinging the bat well, but his April was dreadful. His late June into July was not particularly strong either. A lot of people concerned over the fact that the one thing he's always done well is drive runs in, and he really wasn't driving runs in. Now, he was hitting with runners in scoring position, a little bit, and that's one of his calling cards is for not having a lot of power, he does do a lot of damage gap to gap with runners in scoring position. He's now up over 70 RBI. Now, I know that RBI is not a one-to-one youth thing, right? Other guys have to get on base for you to drive runs in. We've seen really good hitters have low RBI totals because, the team around them isn't getting on. Kyle Schwarber, for a long point in this season, basically was 1 to 2 home runs to RBI, and that just shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
And that was indicative of Trey Turner, right? And so I know RBIs are not 1 to 1, but his ability to drive runs in the last couple of weeks, let's say the last 2 weeks specifically, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I think it's going to hold through the rest of August, into September, into the postseason. But I do believe in baseball, over 162 games, sometimes you need an unlikely source to pick you up for 2 weeks or a month maybe, right? And maybe those two guys are your August unlikely source. And then come September, you do see, Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper take it back, right? You see maybe Trey Turner has a great month. Those types of things, that's encouraging to me because you weren't getting that for a large pocket of the first 3 months, 4 months of the season. It was like if Harper and Schwarber weren't hitting and Marsh in the first half, if those guys weren't hitting, you weren't scoring.
Yeah, very true. I mean, Marsh certainly tailing off after that all-star start that he had to the season. His OPS has dipped. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but very slowly it's been dipping. And of course, JT Realmuto, you can't expect the bat of JT Realmuto 2019 anymore. So right. I think it's, you're better off if Marsh and Realmuto are hitting 7 and 8 in this lineup. And with those two producing, it really gives you the option to let them hit where they need to hit.
Well, and I think not only that, but even further down the lineup, that to me is where I think a Justin Crawford thrives. Him hitting 9th is a perfect spot for him on this team, kind of as that, wraparound leadoff hitter, especially if you are going to have Kyle Schwarber lead off, because there's not speed. Schwarber gets on base a ton. He hits for power. All of the good outweighs the minimal bad of Kyle Schwarber. One of them is he doesn't run the base as well. But if Justin Crawford's on at the bottom of the lineup, flips that lineup over, now you've got Schwarber coming up, you've got Harper coming up, you've got Arraez coming up, with the potential of Justin Crawford and Trey Turner on the base paths. That creates, and Bryson Stott just a few spots ahead of him. Those are your 3 base stealers. Those are your 3 havoc creators on the base paths. This is not a particularly fast team, other than those 3 guys and Derek Hill, but those 3 guys, I think, really give you the flexibility, especially Justin Crawford at 9, to create some runs. And that's another thing they didn't do a good job of at the beginning of the season, was creating and manufacturing runs. Now they're starting to be able to do it a little bit more because Justin Crawford's hitting, Bryson Stott is hitting, and then you turn the lineup back over and you've got speed on the base paths.
Yeah, and Luis Arraez, the unlikely cleanup hitter that nobody really expected to have. His contact with those speedsters ahead of him on base, a lot of those runs are scoring now. So it's really funny if you look at the numbers over the years. Luis Arraez has some of the fewest RBIs of anybody with that many at bats. It's because he was always leading off, hitting second. But guess what? He's getting his hits because he gets hits all the time. There's runners on now, so making quite the difference. He himself is not a fast guy, so maybe it actually is better that he is hitting 4th.
So he had 3 hits last night. Do you know how many hard hit balls he had last night?
0.
None. But he just finds soft spots. He finds his bat to ball skills are so good that he finds these spots. And as you said, him hitting 4th, it really does make sense. It's not conventional. It's not old school. I'm sure the older generation is, old man yelling at clouds saying, back in my day, Lou Gehrig hit 4th. But it's not that way anymore. And the Phillies have found out that they want Kyle Schwarber at the top of the lineup. They have found out that I think they have not still found out yet that Bryce Harper should not hit 3rd, but we'll let them take their baby steps to get to where they need to be. Luis Arraez hitting 4th is actually the right decision. I went and looked at this yesterday. MLB hitters this year, on average, this is the average MLB hitter with runners in scoring position hitting 4th, are hitting 246 with a 421 slug and a 23.2% strikeout rate. Since Luis Arraez joined the Phillies, hitting 4th, he's hitting 294 with a 471 slug and a 5% strikeout rate. I mean, so it's not conventional. He's not your power threat, right? He's not the guy that's going to hit you 30 home runs. But I do think, as you brought up, this is the type of guy that his individual RBI totals I think might have a chance to skyrocket based on the fact that a team finally decided, hey, maybe this guy doesn't lead off. He hits with runners in scoring position because he puts the ball in play so frequently.
Yeah, by accident, with all these players ahead of him in the lineup, he is going to drive in a lot of runs.
Yeah.
So really, really, really important. And then after that, with Alec Bohm behind him, and now that Alec Bohm is hitting, it's almost like the opposition gets through Arraez, or either they feel defeated or they think, oh, I got past Arraez, and then what do you know, Bohm surprises them.
You know, I thought Ricky Bowe made a really interesting comment on the postgame show last night. And, you know, it sounds simple. Hitting is not simple, but like the aspects of hitting compiled together individually are simple. And it's basically kind of what you just said. He's getting the opportunity to get his hands extended. He's getting the opportunity to get the bat head out in front of the zone. And I do think you're right. He is getting pitches to hit after Luis Arraez. So the benefit of not just Bryce Harper, whose on base percentage is almost 500 since Luis Arraez has hit behind him because of all the walks he's amassing, but also Alec Bohm behind him. Arraez is giving him, like, you have to pitch to Bohm because Arraez is putting the ball in play so much.
Yeah. I mean, you can't walk Bohm if you've got these guys on base. So you have to throw pitches and try to beat them. And Bohm is meeting the match.
This is we've talked all season. This is episode 24 of this show. I've been pretty down on this Phillies team for most of the season. And the kind of the phrasing I've been using is, it's a good team, but a flawed team. It's a good team, but a fundamentally unsound team. And I think that I'm not ready to cast off that just yet because I've seen the valleys, because they're at a mountain. They're at a mountain right now offensively. I've seen the valleys. I want to see it happen over the course of a 2-week stretch. But I do think that the way that they've played against Minnesota, the way that they played against St. Louis, the way that they've now played against Miami, those are three teams that you absolutely are better than and should beat. That maybe in July, there's a couple of games in those three series that you don't win. I think even as early as like 3 weeks ago, Andrew Painter gives up a grand slam in the first inning. You probably don't win that game 3 weeks ago. They battled and won that game. Like there's some games along the way that I think they've done a really nice job of competing in. This Marlins series has been a rock fight. Punch, counter punch. And, they're better than the Marlins, but 4 weeks ago, they probably lose one of these two games.
Yeah, I'm telling you, on Sunday, Andrew Painter gives up the grand slam, hits the next batter. Who wasn't thinking like, oh man, this one's done?
Yep.
So, kudos to them for bearing down, staying in. I think that's really going to matter because you know what, by the way, the Twins, Phillies sweep the Twins, and the Twins have taken the first two against the Braves. Like this is the kind of stuff that needs to happen. Twins are no slouch of a team. I know they're just over the 500 mark, but they're not a bad team. So Marlins just over the 500 mark, not a bad team. I think this is a sign the Phillies are coming to life too against some teams that have a little more talent. I don't know if it's a mental thing too, because Phillies have struggled against some of the better teams. Looking ahead down the stretch, they're going to face some of these better teams. So they need to be taking care of business like these. They can't be letting games get away where the bullpen comes in and 8th inning, Jose Alvarado walks the bases loaded. I mean, that's what they have to get past because it almost was creating the atmosphere that you feel like you're waiting to lose. I think that's kind of been shaken.
Yeah, and last night, I mean, you talk about the bullpen, right? Duran was down. Bolin was down. It was really a question of like, which of these guys are going to come in and how are they going to be utilized, right? So Alvarado pitches the 7th inning, and his command was shaky, gets the benefit of a nice play by Alec Bohm at first, rolls up the unassisted double play, gets out of the inning, right? And that was after a leadoff base runner. Those types of things, when they don't come back to haunt you, they help you win games. You have to use Kerkering in the 8th, which made sense, using Kerkering in the 8th against 2-3-4. Raley has to get the save. Raley pitches, in the 9th, pretty efficient inning, and they win that game. And the bullpen has had its question marks for a very long time, and Alvarado's been a part of it. Kerkering's been a part of it. I know people have been a little bit frustrated with Brooks Raley. He's given up the same amount of home runs in 6 innings pitched with the Phillies that he did in his first 30-some-odd innings with the Mets this year. But kind of the rotating carousel of bullpen pieces, you were down your 2 best relievers last night, and you found a way to win that game because you were able to tack on some insurance runs late in the game. The offense helps the bullpen helps the offense, the defense helps the offense. It's a circle of life thing that for the last 2 weeks has really found itself in a much better footing than it's been for a majority of the season.
Yeah, and you really need outs from Alvarado and Kerkering. I mean, that just has to happen for the Phillies to win. And the two of them for the last 6 weeks haven't been getting outs. It's imperative that they actually get some now. To me, it's just the walks. The walks will kill you every single time.
Even John Kruk brought it up last night. He was like, "Well, leadoff walk scored. Imagine that." And it's tale as old as time. It's not just your bullpen. It's really any leverage spot. Could be your starter. Could be your bullpen. If you walk the leadoff hitter, you are playing with fire. You're expecting damage, and that's kind of where this bullpen has found itself a lot this season, right? I think Alvarado is probably the main culprit, but Kerkering's command has been shaky at times. Keller's command was shaky before he hit the IL. Backus's command was shaky before he's been in and out of the IL. To have some stability heading into the postseason would be beneficial to this team, no question about it.
Yeah, they really need those two to step up. I just can't underscore that enough.
So you brought up the kind of who they're going to play and the schedule and things like that. And we'll get to that in just a second. You also said something about taking advantage of these situations, right? The Braves lose 2 to the Twins. The other team that the Phillies are starting to put distance between themselves is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're in a weird spot right now. They've lost 3 in a row. Ketel Marte did not show up to the ballpark the other night, got put on the restricted list, and then flew back to Arizona for imaging on his knee. I'm not entirely sure what's going on in that situation. I don't want to speculate. Terry Lavello was choked up talking about him, so I'm not entirely sure what's happening. But on the baseball field, the Arizona Diamondbacks have had a rough week. They really have struggled against the Boston Red Sox in their first 2 games there. They've lost 3 in a row. So while you're not separating yourself entirely from the Padres, who have played some really good baseball, Arizona you're separating from. The Marlins directly you are separating yourself from by already winning the series. The Cardinals have played some decent baseball since you've played them, but you've won the series against the Twins. You won the series against the Marlins. You're looking for another sweep. You're starting to put some distance between you and the teams below you.
Yeah, very, very, very important. I mean, the Diamondbacks were really creeping up, and it made sense. I mean, they had too much talent to be where they are, but of course, their offense has a lot to do with Ketel Marte. So I think that's the big thing for them. I think that'll be an epic letdown if they lose him for an extended period of time. And then the Padres, who went from potential sellers, maybe going to trade Mason Miller to buying. In fact, if I have a theory that the reason the Phillies didn't get a starter was that the Phillies were in on Casey Mize until the very, very end, because he was the last deal to get announced, and the Padres came away with him. So Padres loaded up a little bit. So I think they're the bigger threat of the two for sure. But I also think the Padres are flawed. I mean, you saw their offense go completely lifeless. So yeah, Phillies do need to put some distance there. For a while there, it felt like it was a little sketchy for the Phillies standing in the wild card. It was no longer firmly theirs. In fact, even dropping out briefly. But it's time to make a statement that the Phillies belong there.
So you brought up the remaining schedule, and I got asked this filling in for you on the mailbag on 97.3 the other day. Somebody asked me about, will the Phillies season be determined by the level of success on the road? And that's an interesting question, because most of the time the theory is if you play 41-41 or 41-40 on the road, somewhere in that range, you can play slightly above 500 and get into the postseason, slightly above 500 at home and get into the postseason with like a 90-ish win mark. The Phillies, when I got asked that question, actually were playing better on the road than they were at home to that point. They've given up less runs. They had scored more runs. They were just playing better on the road for whatever reason. But it was an interesting question because the teams that they play on the road, when I got asked that question, they had 23 road games left, where it combined 24 games under 500. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're playing the Mets and the Angels, who are dreadful this season. But they also have 3 in Atlanta, and that buoyed that back up a little bit. But you have 3 against Seattle, probably the most underperforming team of the Major League Baseball season. Maybe the most, them and the Blue Jays, probably 2 of the most disappointing teams in baseball this year. But then you have the Angels, the Diamondbacks, who you're directly competing with, the Braves, 2 in Washington, and 4 in New York against the Mets. That's a very favorable back end of the schedule when you got to go on the road for 20, they've played the 5 games against the Cardinals and the Mets and the Twins. So you have 18 more road games. And I know there's a West Coast trip involved in there, but that's a very favorable schedule down the stretch when you do still have to play Milwaukee at home. You do still have to play some other good teams at home as the season unfolds. I think the answer to that question that Ed posed on the mailbag is yes. I do think their schedule on the road is going to dictate how successful they are.
Yeah, that's very fair point. And you got to wonder at the end, as the Brewers and Rays come to town, are they going to be setting up for the playoffs? Are they going to be resting some players? Or are they going to be fighting for home field advantage throughout? I mean, so I think that will have a lot to do with the competition they have there at home, too. So a lot of that's yet to be determined. But whether it's home or on the road, you want to see the Phillies take care of some business against the Braves. The Phillies kind of made it a division race, and then they sort of dropped back. It's kind of slightly arcing towards
5.5 now, I think.
Divisional race again. So if I'm the Phillies, I want to go for it. I don't want to see them. I don't want to settle for a wild card. If I'm the Phillies, I want to see them really put their foot on the gas, take care of some business against the Braves, get back in that race too. Because the Braves, they didn't necessarily. I was surprised. I thought they were going to do more at the deadline.
Very surprised they were kind of quiet.
So, and maybe it was because they had a little good stretch, but I was expecting them to be the ones to get Scooble or really load up.
The Braves, as you brought up, did not do a ton at the trade deadline. Got some fringe pieces, and you kind of mentioned that the division is still in play. 5.5 back. I would say that the Phillies end up I still believe the Braves are going to win the division. I think the Phillies are a wild card team, but it's something to strive for, right? It's something to ascend to. And I think even if you fall short of the division, which I think probably still does happen, but if you do fall short of the division, pushing for it, or at least feeling like you're pushing for it, elevates you in the wild card standings. It gives you something to attain that's greater than just get in and right? Because that's how it feels like they've been playing baseball for the last 3 months, is like get in and then we can breathe.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm foot on the gas. There's no other way to do it. And when they seem to get comfortable, that's when things seem to catch up to them. So I would really like to see them just keep that foot on the gas. So
to what I was saying before we lost our audio, to the Rays point, I think the Rays are going to win the East. The Yankees are a good team, but I do think they're 5 back of the Rays. I think the Rays win the East. The Rays probably would be the team that has less to play for by the time they get to Citizens Bank Park, because the American League is so bad outside of 4 teams. And one of them is the White Sox. And no disrespect to the White Sox, but it's an unexpected division leader. It's an unexpected good team. And they're probably going to get a bye as well. Like the Yankees and Red Sox are going to be playing in the wild card round. They might play each other in the wild card round. And then whoever wins the West, presumably the Astros, are going to get a lesser team, whatever that third wild card team is, while the Yankees and Red Sox have to beat each other up again. I think the winner of the AL East is going to kind of just sit and watch from a distance for a while, because the rest of the league is not very good.
Yeah, that's very, very fair to say. And by the way, kudos to the White Sox. I remember, maybe you remember the name Trevor Richards, who briefly pitched in the Phillies bullpen this year, ends up getting cut, traded for cash considerations to the White Sox. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a good place for Richards to go. They probably don't have much going on. Well, Richards has been good and the White Sox have been excellent.
Yeah.
So kudos to the White Sox. I'm happy to see them get some success because I was at a White Sox game last year when I was in town in Chicago, and it was just dead. Like there was no optimism, no hope, and other than people like me seeing a new stadium for the first time, there was not a lot going on there. It's the South Side.
It's a long rebuild, and I mean, you really like they tore it down to the foundation. I mean, they went as MLB The Show rebuild as you possibly could go, where you traded anybody and everybody and let contracts expire. And other than Andrew Benintendi, basically didn't pay anybody for a 4-year window. And they've started to put some of these moves together, right? They trade Crochet and they get some pieces back in that really help them. They're starting to get some elevation from some of their homegrown guys. Some of their high draft picks are starting to ascend. Their high prospects are starting to ascend. You signed Munetaka Morikami, who has been awesome, for them in his MLB rookie season. And really, like, listen, is the AL Central a good division? Not really. It might be the worst in baseball, but somebody's got to win it, and they've played some really good ball over the season. High offense, high octane. Like, they win a lot of games 7-6 and 8-5, and they're willing to give up runs because they know they're going to score runs. It's been an interesting and fun team to watch. That, I thought we probably thought they were going to start to build and not be the laughing stock that they were 2 years ago. But I don't know if anybody predicted them to win the division, especially one where the Tigers were so heavily favored.
Yeah, it's kind of like last year's Reds team. I think though the question for them going forward is what's next. I mean, the
Sure.
Reds didn't do a lot to add on. We'll see what the White Sox do. By the way, the Mets did them a favor taking Luis Robert off their hands. I think that had a lot to do with their success too.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's, the AL, the Rays themselves might be locked up by the time they get to Philly. I do think the Brewers will still be playing for some type of home field advantage.
Yeah, and you know what? They have perhaps the hottest pitcher in all of baseball on that team, and maybe the Phillies get lucky and miss him. I don't know. I mean, this is a game of schedule sometimes, so maybe the Phillies will get lucky. I mean, they're the second to last series. I'm sure he pitches against the Phillies though, as they try to set him up for the playoffs.
Yeah. So speaking of pitching, one thing that we didn't really brief on pre-show, but I did want to bring it up to you a little bit. So Zach Wheeler. A fourth straight start in which he does not get through the sixth inning now. And I believe that might be 5 out of 6, if I remember correctly. Where are you with Wheeler? Because to me, it looks like he's pulling a little bit more, kind of overthrowing the fastball a little bit. 4 walks last night is very uncharacteristic Wheeler. Command's been a little bit off since the All-Star break. Overall has pitched okay, and last night, limited the damage, kind of a really workman-like appearance for him, in and out of some trouble, pitched out of it, got a ton of strikeouts through, 5, 6, 7, or 7, 8, 9 in the lineup, but Command's been a little bit faltery considering what we know from Zach Wheeler. Where are you kind of at with Wheeler heading into the final few starts of the season?
Same place I am with Christopher Sanchez. I mean, I think we're in the dead arm period of the season in a lot of ways, right? This is where a lot of the fatigue hits in. For Wheeler, it's a little different. I mean, he had that major surgery, so I can definitely see him losing some of that adrenaline, as often is the case when you get to this part of the season. As you get to July and August, you're really grinding. So I think he needs a little refresh. If I were the Phillies, there's an opportunity, I don't know how, but to bounce him back a day because the schedule allows it. Although without any depth, I don't know how this is going to happen. He might benefit from that. I think he also will benefit from the adrenaline down the stretch when it comes to playoff-like atmospheres that are going to develop for sure as the Phillies fight to get to the playoffs. But yeah, I wouldn't. I'm not worried. And my solace is that he does know how to pitch, right? He's not just throwing. So Even when he's not himself, he knows how to battle. He knows how to stay in. He knows how to win some games.
I think if the Phillies had, I don't know, let's say like 3 or 4 more wins on the year, I could see a scenario where you get an Alan Ron-Hell start or a Brian Keller start somewhere down the line, like those types of kind of give Zach Wheeler an extra day. I know he hates pitching on extra rest, but
yeah.
I think that it might be beneficial for him. I think it might be beneficial for everybody in the rotation. I mean, their four guys, even including Aaron Nola, have thrown a lot of pitches and a lot of innings this year. I wonder if that would be beneficial. I don't know if they have the luxury of doing it, fighting and kind of clawing their way into a playoff spot. If they were 3 or 4 games up in the wild card, you might see it in late August, early September. But just one, I'm not sure that they're going to do that at this current moment.
Well, in 12 days, they can add one more arm. And I can see the Phillies adding an extra starter just to try to give some breath. I mean, although it's kind of contingent upon Nola and Painter for me, because when they're pitching better, then the bullpen isn't overworked. We've seen it way too much on the short Nola starts, the short Painter starts, what it does to the bullpen. So.
And credit to Aaron Nola. I mean, over his last 8 starts, he's pitched to a 4 ERA. He's thrown about 5.5-ish innings per start. The whip's down a little bit. The strikeouts are up. I think that's all I can ask from Aaron Nola at this point is if you keep the Phillies in most of the games that you play, that's a win for me. If you are somebody who is going to go out there and get into the 6th, give up 3 runs, maybe your patented solo home run or 2 is in there, but you're not giving up the 3-run shot, and you're giving this team a chance to win. I understand people complain about the contract, but at this point, 5 1/3, 3 earned runs, 5 strikeouts, couple of hits, couple of home runs, maybe. Aaron Nola's done his job in keeping you in the game.
Yeah, if you're worried about the money, then consider this what he was paid for when he was so good early on, when he had that really, really, really team-friendly contract. So
right.
I did whatever. The money is spent, right? And he's going to be around. So I will say this, though. If I'm the Phillies, I'm keeping an eye on the waiver wire the next 10 days or so, because there will be some teams who have fallen out of contention. Might throw a player on waivers, see if they get claimed, just so they can get out from under the money. The Phillies, I'm thinking in particular, Phillies are interested in someone like Jeff Hoffman at the trade deadline, goes to the Twins. If the Twins fall out of this, maybe he's a type, goes on waivers. Maybe somebody can grab him and pay the salary, and the Twins are happy to save a few bucks. So I'm keeping an eye on that waiver wire, because that's kind of become the new waiver trades. It's just that, hey, who's willing to take some money off our hands? And
well,
so
you're right too. Like we talked about the AL Central, right? I know Detroit needs somebody to throw innings, but like, would they consider putting Jack Flaherty on waivers, right? Like that type of team, a team that maybe falls out of contention. I know the AL Central is kind of all 500 with the exception of the Royals. I mean, the teams below the White Sox, I should say, are all about 500 with the exception of the Royals. But those types of teams, you're right. They make sense. Like, there's a lot of teams that feel like they're competing, but the reality is there are only 3 teams below the Padres who are within 4 games of the wild card. Everybody else is 6.5 out at this point. And that starts with the Pirates. That starts with teams like the Reds. Then you go into the Nationals and all of those teams, right? But like, there's only 3 teams that are within 4 games of the NL wild card standing. I think those teams that weren't sure if they were buyers or sellers, the teams that aren't good enough, are starting to fall back.
Yep. So just keep an eye on the waiver wire. Maybe the Phillies get an extra starter out of this just to create some of that depth. Maybe they find a relief arm that'll be very, very helpful. So there's the possibility does exist. So by August 31st, which is the last moment that they can actually help the Phillies into the playoffs, getting into the organization, I think that you'll see some teams try to get some players claimed.
All right, so that'll pretty much wrap things up for us here today. 5 straight wins for the Phils. They go for a 2nd consecutive series sweep, this time over the Marlins today, 6:05 start. And then they're off on Thursday, back at it for a weekend series against the St. Louis Cardinals over the weekend. Any final thoughts before we get out of here today, Frank?
Phillies got to keep the foot on the gas. That'll be my mantra, I think, the rest of the way.
About a month and a half left. We'll see where the Phillies find themselves. Again, even as frustrating as they were, I think the consistent thought that we had was this team will make the playoffs. It's just a matter of how maddeningly inconsistent they are along the way. So we'll talk more about it next week. We'll wrap up the Marlins series, talk about the Cardinals series as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, and we'll see where the Phillies finish. So for my partner, Frank Klose, I'm Tyler Zulli saying thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you liked what you heard, if you enjoyed what you're listening to, leave a 5-star review if you're listening on any of the audio-only platforms. And if you're listening on YouTube or any of the any of the viewing platforms, drop a like and a subscription on the way out as well. We'd really appreciate it. We'll be back next week for the latest installment of the Running Back Podcast. Until then, we'll talk to you then. See you.